convince everyone that she's good.
Good is not a thing you are, Kamala. It is a thing you do.
I know dressing up as Captain Marvel's weird. I spend too much time in Fantasyland.
Cool. Is this Nani's?
That is just junk.
What does it feel like?
Like an idea come to life. Everything's changing really fast.
If you save one life, you save the world.
Are you sure that we can keep that on?
To no mind.
It's a lawsuit.
Great, that'll make Captain Marvel in court. And we'll be the first case in the American judiciary to hug it out.
All right, now let's get into the story a little bit about the origins of Miss Marvel. In comics, she's got similar powers to that of Richard Reed of the Fantastic Four, where she's like stretch, whatever the fuck you want to call her. She's got stretching powers like Richard Reed of the Fantastic Four, in the comics at least. Now, I don't know how they're going to introduce her powers or what powers she has in the Disney Plus TV show, but I'm pretty mind blown to see what they can do with her, and how they link her up with Captain Marvel in the new upcoming The Marvels sequel movie for Captain Marvel. Basically, she's gonna somehow, as like episodes 4 or 5 happen, she's gonna be introduced to Captain Marvel. Or they might do early on surprise where episode 2 or 3 she sees Captain Marvel for the first time and is mentored by Captain Marvel. But my prediction hopefully is correct, and she gets mentored by Captain Marvel more so in like episode 3, episode 4, like right around there. Episode 3 is when Captain Marvel, Brie Larson, shows up for the first time and basically mentors Miss Marvel on how to use her powers properly and accurately, and how to control her powers, how to basically be a hero. Because what I think the director Kevin Feige should do for a future film, whether that's 2024, 2025, whatever, I think Kevin Feige should introduce the Young Avengers, basically the next generation of Avengers, because they're going to do Ironheart or something like that. I think it's called Ironheart. I'm not too sure. But they're going to do something like that where they introduce the next generation of a possible Avengers. They're going to do the Secret Wars, or Secret Invasion with the Marvel Comics. But the way they did it in comics is basically that the Skrulls were evil and that they created the Inhumans, which includes Black Bolt, who you saw in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness for a short time on TV when he tried to kill Wanda, but she used the Reality Stone that's within her to basically remove his mouth. Which was a huge disappointment. The Illuminati was a huge joke. It was like another Ralph Boner Disney dick joke. Excuse my language, but it was like one of those jokes that Disney wanted to poke at us when they introduced the other version of Quicksilver from the X-Men verse. In WandaVision, when they said, hey, his name was really Ralph Boner. He wasn't really Quicksilver all along. Basically, it was like a huge joke to us, the fan base. Like they were roasting us, and that was a cruel, cruel joke. But I hope that they don't do that with Miss Marvel. I hope they actually use her and utilize her in a positive way, that it means something. Honestly, because in my opinion, they should not be using Marvel characters as jokes. Like the Illuminati is a real organization in the Marvel comics where they are taken seriously. One of the comics, I don't really read the comics. I'm more or less just the cinematic verse fan. But I have heard stories and I have read comics a little bit. And I have seen YouTube video explanations on these comics, more so than actually reading them. But still, I don't think that they should do jokes like that. The Illuminati was meant to be like an introduction. In my opinion, it was supposed to be meant as like an introduction to the X-Men, the introduction to the Fantastic Four, the introduction to the Inhumans, which will show up in Secret Invasion whenever that happens. So all this and more were supposed to happen. Or when we saw the trailer, we thought, oh God, the Illuminati is real. But no, it was more or less the Illuminati was fake, and they wanted to just throw another roasting joke at us and make fun of us for believing something that wasn't true. Because they used the 90s version of Professor X when they introduced his hover chair or his hover wheelchair from the cartoon series. Basically, enclosing his wheelchair in the golden hovercraft that he uses in the cartoon series of the 90s TV show X-Men. And it was just more or less a joke. Like, Wanda went through them all like it was butter on a piece of bread. Like, she went through them like it was nothing, and it meant nothing to her, and it meant nothing to the creators of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And it was just a huge disappointment, in my opinion. I mean, that was like the only disappointment, in my opinion. The movie was still like an 8.5 out of 10 rating for me, because there was still some awesome, impactful parts and some scary parts on behalf of Sam Raimi, who is the creator of the Evil Dead series, as well as many other series. Basically, that's what he's known for, Sam Raimi, is Spider-Man, the original 3, with Tobey Maguire, which he doesn't really want to be known for the third one. He wants to be a ghost director, basically, under another persona, because he hated Spider-Man 3 for good reason. Spider-Man 3 was, I'm not going to say completely trash, but if I had to give it a rating, maybe a 4.5 out of 10, and that's being really nice and kind, because there were some awful, boring parts. And that's not because of Sam Raimi. That's because of Sony Studios, who at the time, the executives were like, oh, Sam, I think you should throw in Venom. I think you should throw Venom in. He should be like the next supervillain. And no, you don't do that. One, because Sam Raimi himself has voiced his opinion during the making of the movie and was like, listen, with all due respect, and I respect your guys' opinion, I do not understand the character arc of Venom. And if I throw him in the movie without understanding his complexity first, it's going to turn out to be a crap movie and nobody's going to want to see it. Now, mind you, you will have a few fan bases out there that did like Spider-Man 3 amongst the other two other Spider-Mans with Tobey Maguire, which the other two were actually decently put together. But in my opinion, the third one really crapped the bed and really shit the bed. No pun intended to Johnny Depp. But all that and said, Spider-Man 3 just never really was there for me. But I'm getting off track. We're talking about Miss Marvel in this episode of the Annihilation Lounge podcast. Basically, what I wanted to talk about, again, about Miss Marvel, is that I don't want her to be a joke. I want her to be taken seriously. So if you're going to introduce her character, do what you did with Moon Knight. Introduce her properly. The only thing I didn't like, and now let me change topics for a minute about Moon Knight. I know I'm going to do this all over on any podcast I do. I'm going to talk about one topic and change it to another spontaneously without any rhyme or reason. But let me talk more or less on Moon Knight for a second. I give Moon Knight a rating scale 7.5 out of 10. 7.5. Now, the reason why it's not like a 9 or a solid 10 is because of one reason, and that's because they introduced Jake Lockley, the third personality of Stephen Grant or Mark Spector, whatever you want to call him. They gave the third personality an introduction at the end of the show's series. Now, if you can convince Oscar Isaac to come back to the movies, and I mean movie-wise, not TV show-wise, not like a season 2 of Moon Knight, but a full-length feature film, let's say The Midnight Suns. You introduce different characters into it, Daredevil, Blade, Ghost Rider, maybe Doctor Strange if you want to, he's optional. But introduce them all with Moon Knight. Now, introduce them all. I don't have a story or a theory about a fan fiction story. I don't have any of that. I'm not good at coming up with stories on the spot. But create something. Doesn't have to be the Midnight Suns, but that's an option. But introduce something that includes Moon Knight theatrically, feature-length film-wise. It could be a 2-hour film. No more than 2 hours. I mean, no less than 2 hours, in my opinion. Because Moon Knight is that kind of a character that takes a long time to explain and a long time to understand. It took 6 weeks to understand who Moon Knight was during the TV show's run. So, basically, if you can convince Oscar Isaac to come back, I would suggest doing so, because Moon Knight was a successful run, in my opinion. It was a 7.5, and the reason why it wasn't a solid 10 is because you introduced Jake Lockley at the end of the show when you could have introduced him in like episode 4. You didn't have to wait till the very, 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 very end of the show in like a post-credit scene and introduce him for like a 10 to 15 second like video at the end and introduce him that way. You couldn't have done that. Like you shouldn't have done that, because that's not long enough to understand the complexity of Jake Lockley as the third personality. Because in comic books, Jake Lockley is more the brutal type of personality, but he's more or less like a limo driver or a taxi driver or whatever in the comics, where in certain situations he comes out and brutally obliterates anybody in his path. Whereas Mark Spector is more of the mercenary, like a Deadpool type of character, except minus the fourth wall break. He's more or less like the Deadpool without the fourth wall break is Mark Spector. Whereas Stephen Grant in the comics is like the poor, what's the terminology that I could use? Like the poor peasant of the personality. He's strong in his own rights when he's Mr. Knight or whatever, but at the same time, he's not as known. It's either Jake Lockley or Mark Spector that's like the brutal type of murderer, mercenary, whatever you want to call them. Anti-hero, whatever the word you want to call them. And in my opinion, you should really bring back Oscar Isaac. Like, no one else can replace Oscar Isaac to playing Moon Knight. I mean, if it's a cartoon, I guess you can get someone else to do the voice for him. But if it's live action, no one else can replace him, because once you put a face on a character in a live action form, there is no one else that can play that character. It's either that character shows up again, or you completely scrap that character forever, because no one else, in my opinion, can play that character. It's not like the Fantastic Four or Spider-Man, where you could always restart the story all over again, because people remember Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight. So you try and do that again in like a Spider-Man style where, you got a different actor in and do a completely different story. It's not going to be the same. So if you're going to bring back Moon Knight, which I suggest you do in some form, I suggest you try to convince Oscar Isaac to come back to playing him so that he can play Jake Lockley, Mark Spector, and Stephen Grant, all three in a theatrical form. Now, I know I said early on, no less than 2 hours, but you can do it as little as an hour and 45-minute movie. But no more than 2.5 hours. Now, that's really putting it out there. That's almost like Endgame zone, where Endgame was like 3 hours and like 20 minutes or 3.5 hours. Something like that. You could do Moon Knight's movie in like an hour and 45 to 2 hours and 20 minutes, no more than that. Seriously. All right, I'm going to end today's episode of the Annihilation Lounge. I hope you enjoyed, and talk to you all in the next episode. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this great channel and click that bell icon to stay notified for every single time I drop a video right here on YouTube. Also, check out our official merchandise store tonight or today and get yourself some awesome AWM Studios merchandise by going to bonfire.com/store/AWM Studios and getting yourself some awesome merchandise today. Also, use SUMMER22 as the promo code to get 15% off your order of the new colored logo t-shirts. Thank you for joining us on the Annihilation Lounge, and talk to you all in the very next episode. Good night, everyone.